Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's great that we've got almost a full house. Fantastic. Let me introduce myself. I'm John Montford. I'm the chair of Woodcote Resident Society. We occasionally have public meetings. We had one last year at Langley Vale, and this year we're having this meeting tonight. We'd love to have more public meetings, but we have limited resources. So, if we build up our membership subscription fees, hopefully we'll have more meetings going forward. So, can I make just a plea at the start? If anyone isn't a signed up member of the Resident Society and paid their £5 subscription fee, could you please do that either online or by cash tonight with Bob at the back there? That would be fantastic. Without further ado, I'd just like to introduce who we have here tonight. The main purpose of the meeting is to learn about what's going on with general hospital site and more generally hospital services that we all depend upon through the Epsom and Helier NHS Trust. So I'm delighted tonight to have on my left here James Blythe, who's the Managing Director of Epsom and Helier NHS Trust, and Chris Rivers, who's the Interim Director of Estates.
Hi, I'm Chris.
So hopefully between them they'll be able to provide you with all the up-to-date information and hopefully answer any questions that you have. The intention is to broadly have about 20 minutes for their presentation, and then it's opened up for your questions, and then the second part of the meeting will be an opportunity to ask questions from your local ward councillors. And delighted to say we have Councillor Liz Frost.
Evening.
And Councillor Steve McCormick.
Evening.
Let me just say that the intention is for the first part of the meeting with James and Chris to video it, just so that we have the information available to us, and we might use some of that information. Do you want to say, Steve, exactly how that would be used?
Yeah, the purpose is we'll record the discussion, we'll stop it after the Q&A, and we'll make it available on the Word website for anybody that's not been able to make it this evening. So it's just a record that we can keep. So I know that there are some other meetings going on tonight, but some people may be attending in preference to this one. So just a record of that. So if anybody doesn't want, well, nobody's in shot apart from anybody up here. So if you want to get any video, then it's there. But probably keep out of it, okay? And as soon as the discussion with James, etc., is finished, I'll shut that off and we'll crack on. Yeah. Thank you.
We will make some notes of the meeting and put those on our website, the Woodcote Resident Society website, just so that people can find out exactly what was discussed tonight, and people that aren't able to attend tonight can find out what was going on. So, over to you, James. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. First of all, can everyone hear me at the back of the room? Is this okay? Thank you. Okay. I have a slightly sore throat, so I'm hoping my voice will hold on for the night, but please forgive me if I start to struggle slightly. In preparing for this meeting, I've been asked to talk about a number of things. First is to update everyone on where we are with our plans for a new hospital. So I will share what I can around that. Secondly, to talk about where we are with the car park and some of the car parking around the hospital in general, which I will aim to do, but Chris also has a significant role in that. And thirdly, I'll just talk about some of the other developments that are happening at Epsom Hospital at the moment. So if I start with where we are with the new hospital, so I think most people will be aware that we have had a long-standing plan to change how we deliver hospital services across Epsom and Helier. We consulted on this plan between 2019 and 2020, and this plan broadly is to build a new hospital at the Sutton Hospital site, to put the 6 24/7 acute hospital services that we run into that new hospital, and to retain both Epsom and St Helier for providing about 85% of patient contacts, but for the lower level, so the non-24/7 services that we run. And the reason that we wanted to do this for some time is that we've got really difficult estate at both Epsom and St Helier, so difficult to maintain the estate. It's really difficult to run two small hospitals, so if you add Epsom and St Helier together, They are about the right size for a major emergency department, for an intensive care unit, for a maternity unit, for a paediatric unit. Both of them are too small, and it's very difficult to get the workforce to run both of them, and it's very difficult financially to run both of them as well. So the trust has been pretty much perpetually in deficit for all the time that it's been in existence because of the difficulties of trying to run basically two services on the income and the footprint where there should really be one. Once we consulted on this scheme, and once the local NHS had decided to proceed with it, we became part of the last government's national new hospital programme. We were ready to go to a planning application in Sutton for the new hospital in about October 2021, and the national programme said that instead of 40 new hospitals nationally, designing 40 hospitals and procuring and building 40 hospitals, what they wanted us all to do instead is design one hospital or one set of standards for a hospital and then procure the same thing 40 times and build it in 40 different places. So it was a programme of national standardisation of hospital design. This meant that we were asked to stop proceeding towards the planning application, and it then took quite a while for the national government programme to produce the sort of the standard specifications for hospitals nationally. Now, we got to a point at the start of this year where that work had got to a point where we could start designing our own local scheme again in line with those standards. And we did that work in the first half of this year. We now have an outline design for the new hospital. For those of you who've worked in architectural construction management fields previously, or currently, that we're at what's called a REBA Stage 2 design. So it's fairly detailed, but some of the kind of internal work and fine detail isn't worked out. Now, we were just on the cusp of starting to have the engagement meetings and the discussions that get you ready for a planning application for something of the size of a hospital. And then there was a change of government. The Chancellor announced her review of the new hospitals programme nationally. And so we needed to stop again because we're now awaiting the outcome of that review process. And we are hoping for some news. We've seen a number of pieces of press around the government's commitment to infrastructure and growth, and we are expecting an announcement imminently about what the outcome of that review is. Obviously, this is a period of uncertainty for us. The national programme is being reviewed, and we don't know what the implications are for our scheme. What I would say is, I think that the case for a new hospital in this area has been a really strong case for a really long time. I think we've known that Epsom and Helier can't carry on in the way that it is. There are challenges with the estate of Epsom. There are even more severe challenges with the estate of St Helier, many parts of which are sort of reaching the end of their useful life, really. So I think we have continued to make a really strong case for our scheme. And hopefully when we hear from the Chancellor, we will hear that we can proceed. So the next thing that, if we hear from the Chancellor that we can proceed and that we're being prioritised within the national programme, the next thing that you will see from us is that we will start to talk openly about the design for the new hospital in Sutton. We will start to engage with residents groups, we will start to engage with other key stakeholders, and that will be in the lead up to a planning application. We would hope to make that planning application now early in 2025. In terms of when a new hospital would be delivered, we think now probably the earliest we could get to would be the back end of 2030 or 2031. It takes quite a long time to go through planning and business case processes and get a hospital built. But I think the priority for us remains to try and get there. Building a new hospital in the NHS requires a certain amount of patience. The last two major NHS hospitals to open both took 18 years from their decision to proceed. So we're 4 years in and we're just going to keep on going. So that's probably all I can say about that before the Chancellor tells us some more. In terms of things happening at Epsom, if I just talk about parking and travel. So you will be aware that we were successful at securing a planning permission for a multi-storey car park that would go next to the driveway and next to the main building on the Epsom site. We have retained that planning application, that planning permission. We have now, in looking back at the scheme from when we started planning applications, when we got it, and from where we are now, and with some changes to vehicle use, for example, with growth in the use of electric vehicles, which are significantly heavier, cost of delivering the scheme has gone up quite significantly. So what we are now working through is what we do with that. There are ways that we can potentially deliver the scheme through private financing that we may go forward with, but we need to work that through. We're looking at a number of options, and we're talking to a number of companies around that. Ultimately, we do need more parking provision on the Epsom Hospital site, even with everything that we're doing as part of our green plan in terms of trying to encourage more active travel, in terms of trying to encourage our staff to find different ways to travel to work. The reality is, with the location of the hospital and the difficulty we have in attracting staff already, and with the fact that our patients tend to have a preference for accessing the site by car, and we know that, and it's very difficult to shift that. We know that we need more parking on the site, and we know that many of you, as local residents, suffer from the fact that, frankly, there isn't enough parking on the site for demand. So we are still looking to see if we can proceed with that multi-storey scheme in some way. What we know, and I do want to just register that we absolutely are aware of this, is that if we do proceed with a multi-storey car park scheme, it will mean losing a very significant amount of parking on this site for around 9 months, and the potential for us to really exacerbate the challenges that are already there is quite significant. So we are already thinking about how we would work at shuttles from transport hubs at Parking Road, etc., so that we can mitigate some of that impact. And to be honest, I think if some of that worked, then we would probably try and leave some of it in and encourage our staff to use other routes afterwards. As I said, we are also looking at whether we can try and increase the facilities for some of our staff to travel to work actively, so walking and cycling, rather than coming in by car. I think the challenge that we have around that is, we are in a competitive marketplace for staff, and if you look at where our staff live and you look at their public transport routes into the Epsom site, if, for example, you are in your west or Chessington, where many of our staff live, it is very, very difficult to get here by public transport, particularly if you have caring responsibilities for young children in the morning. So we know that we need to continue to work on the transport. I've been asked about the LNG land at the back of the site, so the land that was sold to LNG once our own house was demolished. We are currently using that land to mitigate our parking challenges, so we have an arrangement with LNG to do that. LNG haven't given us any certainty in terms of when that arrangement will need to stop, because they need it for some other purpose. We will have a few months' notice when that happens. So one of the things for us is to try and get ahead with the multi-storey plan so we can get that in before that happens. But we don't know any more than that, and the LNG really aren't under any obligation to tell us what or when they're planning to do with the land. I think there are some fairly significant planning issues around that. Other developments on the site that are worth making you aware of. So we have increased the number of beds on the site recently, and there's a couple of ways that's happened. The first is that you will be aware that New Epsom Community Hospital closed last year, and the beds moved on to the Langley Wing on the Epsom Hospital site. So what's in Langley Wing now is basically a stroke rehabilitation centre. The top floor is 2 stroke wards, and the second floor is 2 rehabilitation wards, one of which is what used to be at Niche, at New Epsom and York, and the bottom floor is outpatient rehab, so that is what is in the Langley Wing. We are also in the process of completing a therapy garden at the back of Langley. So this has been funded by the Friends of Epsom and West Park Hospitals, and that's a local charity that has funded that development, and we are anticipating that we'll be working with them much more closely over the coming months, because they are looking to stop operating as a charity, but they've been able to very generously fund that therapy garden, and we're working to see how we can sort of come together and use some of the funds and some of the relationships that they've built up over a period of time. That garden will be opening at the start of November, and we are hoping to do something to mark that. We have also been able to, because one of the rehab wards moved out to the old Alex ward in Epsom, we've been able to put Alex ward back into use as an acute hospital ward, and we've received national funding to increase the beds on the Epsom site. So it was a reflection. So we applied to increase the number of beds on the Epsom site, and we've received the current funding to do it because we reflected on the fact that we were, and still are, to be honest, really struggling with delays getting through the emergency department because the beds are just full all the time. Clearly, that is driven by the demographic we have here. We have an older demographic and we have an aging demographic. So we have been supported with national funding to increase the beds on the Epsom side. We're also part of a hospital group with St George's. So I am part of the shared leadership team across Epsom, Helier and St George's. The chief executive of the hospital works for both organisations. And one of the things that is enabling us to do is to increase the amount of specialist surgery that we're looking to do on the Epsom site. So there, because of the scale of Epsom and Helier, there are things that we just can't do on our own. For example, some more advanced urological surgery, but working with the St George's surgeons, there is more we can do. We already do this with the Marsden, so any people being treated on a cancer pathway in this area will know that we work really closely with the Marsden. By working really closely with St George's, we can do a wider range of procedures here. We can potentially fund more infrastructure and kit for this site, specialist surgery, and actually many surgeons like working at the Epsom site because it has dedicated capacity for surgery, and because we don't admit emergency surgery here, the elective beds, the fund procedures, don't get used to cope with the excess emergency surgery demand. So we're able to have more dedicated demand for elective surgery. So it's increasing the range of procedures we can do on this site. And we also last year opened a cardiac cath lab, so this is for cardiac interventional procedures on the Epsom site. It's just around the back and near the tennis courts, and we are increasing the range of procedures that we do through there. And again, looking to see how we work with St George's to do it. St George's is a massive academic cardiology centre. It's one of the country's leading centres. So we can potentially work with them to try and do more procedures locally so that more patients in the Epsom area aren't having to travel up to St George's for their procedure. I think probably the final thing that I just wanted to flag in case people weren't aware is that there was an entity skin. They were providing a private dermatology service on the site, skin waiting for administration a few months ago. So that has closed on the site, sadly. We don't know what's going to happen with that space, but it's very likely we will get that space back. It's very likely we will put it to use for one of our existing services, possibly on the clinical service. So I think those are probably the main things that I wanted to highlight. Chris, was there anything else from a sort of here and now state's perspective that you used to highlight?
Yeah, thank you, James, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting us here today. James has given you a very useful kind of strategic context of how what our plans are for the hospital and the group as a whole. My role is a lot more prosaic than that. So I look after the buildings, the estates, and I'm responsible for everything that that really affects the neighbours in terms of our hospital. And I'm very conscious of the fact that a large operation on your doorstep can have a big impact. And I see it as one of my clear responsibilities to make sure that we are good neighbours, because we're going to be here for some time, as hopefully the residents are, and it's very, very important that we have a good level of engagement and we're listening to your concerns. And one of the things that I will commit to is being your sort of point of contact for any issues that you've got regarding our buildings, travel, cars, any effects we may or may not have on the air quality, trees, which I know have been an issue recently with some of the residents of Woodcote Green. So, and I'll leave my contact details with John at the end of the meeting. And I'm really happy to have to deal directly with any, comments, concerns, worries you've got, any good feedback you might have from us. James mentioned the travel is such a key part of, how we can be good neighbours. I've come from Guy's and St Thomas's, where travel is probably one of the key, it's probably the key issue for what makes a difference between them being a good neighbour to the residents and not. And I'm really acutely aware of the things that we can do, we will need to do to make your lives more straightforward. Now, James mentioned the car park plans, that hopefully will alleviate some of the congestion that you know, is very apparent most days when people are queuing to get in their car parks at the moment. So, but if you've got any worries, contacts, just you know, you need to get in touch. I will be your point of contact, and you know, I'm happy to take emails, telephone calls, and I will try to respond and make sure that we can do everything we can to be good neighbours here.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, James and Chris, for that. I'll open it up now to questions from the floor. I'm sure you've got some questions to ask James and Chris. Any left?
Thank you. I'm Kate Chairman of Woodcote Residents Association for Veterans I'm not from it's called Woodcote and the Council in Cornwall. There's two things. I understand better the outcomes are in a different specialist unit.
Sorry, but we can't hear
Sorry,
very easily.
I'll stand up.
Stand
I'll stand up, yeah. Thank you. I'm just saying I'm a council in Court Ward, so I thank the Residents Association for making it an open meeting. And I was also saying I understand what better outcomes are in these specialist units that really know what we're doing. So St George's for heart, compassionate outcomes. I can't remember which stroke unit it is that has much better outcomes than any other.
Well, St George's for the hyperacute, but we do very well on our outcomes for rehab care so that after the first 3 days.
Okay. But I was interested about maternity, because obviously that's 24/7 service, you know, but however, will there not be a midwife-led unit or anything here? No,
Let me explain. So, so the plan for maternity under our plans in the hospital is that we will retain antenatal care, so all the antenatal appointments will stay here, and they will stay in all the places in the community that we currently do all the antenatal appointments and all the postnatal checks as well. So there's a really wide range. And my kids were both born at Epsom, and I think one of our postnatal checks happened in Town and Shore Staff Centre, for example, and they happen everywhere. So we will retain all the antenatal care on the Epsom side. All births that aren't home births will take place at the new hospital. We did look really carefully at the evidence around the standalone midwifery units, and they really struggle to maintain a decent flow of births, and the challenge is they draw staffing away from the main neighbour ward. So actually most places are now moving away from standalone midwifery units that don't have obstetric cover, but within the provision on the hospital site, there'll be the main labour ward, and there'll also be a birth centre as there is at Epsom at the moment. So yeah, that's why that decision's been made. I think the standalone midwifery-led unit model is not necessarily one that's sort of being supported by units that are in bigger in the moment.
Sorry, two questions. One's politics and one farming. Politics, I was interested in what you said about the budget and all the rest of it. But 100 days ago, the Labour candidate for Epsom, he's all over social media, including being filmed outside the hospital, saying this hospital will be rebuilt here. And he's also said that St Helier will be rebuilt on the field opposite. I challenged him several times, I didn't believe him for a minute. And it sounds like what you're saying, that was utter nonsense. So can you just confirm that?
Yeah, I'll repeat what I can paraphrase if you want.
Yeah.
So you were asking about statements made by one of the political party candidates in the run-up to the general election about rebuilding both Epsom and St Helier. We have never had a plan in this set of plans to either rebuild Epsom or rebuild St Helier, and particularly not on the field opposite St Helier. I wasn't aware of those statements, and they weren't based on any conversation with me or any of my staff. Within the plan to build a new hospital, we also do have funding set aside to do some further refurbishment and updating of both Epsom and Helier for the purposes that they would be used for in the future. So there are things that we still, and we still have a capital budget every year, and we're still pumping millions into both of the hospitals because they're constantly need updating. But at no stage in this plan do we think that we would rebuild.
Second question, parking. Anybody who catches the bus out of Epsom Town Centre going up the Dorking Road knows it's absolutely horrendous of cars turning into the hospital. There is something you could do now, and that's to ask your departments just to coordinate how they schedule their appointments, to have them spread out longer over the day, rather than what seems to be everybody going there between 9 and 11 o'clock.
So that's a really helpful point. I mean, I would say that we are already spreading our appointments out over, generally within an outpatient clinic, about 8:30 to about 5:30 to 6. So we're already beginning to stretch the working day. I think that I think it would be really difficult to stretch them out even further than that on a routine basis. But it's something we can absolutely look at as in terms of if we increase outpatient provision, can we start trying to put it on different times? Clearly, we need to be able to staff it. And I think the other thing is that we know that patient preference is sometimes to come at those times, even if they tend to be busy with parking. So, I think it would depend service by service. And I can see a number of challenges with it, but it's a helpful suggestion to bear in mind.
Can I just come in on that? Because just as a local resident, my perception is the problem there has got worse more recently. It seems to be a regular thing now. Before it used to be an occasional problem, but now it's a regular problem. Has something changed with the car park for this to happen?
So not particularly with the car parking, so not particularly with the patient car parking. I mean, we've had some changes to staff car parking as the LNG land was cleared. We had to take out some parking and put some back in. But that's mainly affected staff, and it's affected the eligibility for staff. It hasn't affected the patient parking. What I would say is there's a couple of things going on. The first is, in order to clear the backlog after COVID, we are being incentivised and being exhorted by the national system and funded to do more planned care work. So this is outpatient appointments and procedures and operations. We are doing about 14% more work now than we were just before the pandemic. So clearly that means that there's a greater throughput through the site. Now that's the right thing for us to do, because there will be people here who are on waiting lists for us and are waiting frankly too long. And it's important that we get them to see. But we are really pushing the capacity in every single theatre. One of the big projects over the last couple of years has been to increase our theatre utilisation, the percentage of time that a theatre is staffed that we use it, and that's gone up. But that means that we're getting more procedures through, we're getting more people for our outpatient clinics, we're constantly overbooking and putting extras onto our outpatient clinics, and that's delivering that sort of 14% increase in activity. I think the other thing is that we are seeing that more and more people want to drive to the site. We're not really seeing a shift in how people access the site for care. People generally want to drive. There is an ongoing conversation with TfL about whether we can try and stretch more of the bus routes out to the site. For example, the S2 stops in the town centre. I think that's pretty unhelpful. But the current feedback from TfL is they can't get the S2 round the loop around the hospital and Woodcote Road, so they would struggle at the moment to do that. So, there are things that we can do, but ultimately the reason that the site is busier is the site is doing more because we're providing more care because local residents need it.
So,
just while we're talking about parking, you mentioned, we know that there's a planning permission for a huge car park, which in the first instance would go to address the problem that you just mentioned. When you were giving your presentation, you mentioned that there are issues with funding, and you said that there was consideration of private funding or assistance in that sense. You said if receivable. So guess two questions. When you said if proceedable, is there a contemplation that we're not going to go ahead with car parking, therefore the panel will expire? And secondly, how far have you got with private funding and what is the budget for ordinary funding to get parking sorted? Because that drives down to the issue that it is.
Yeah, so there's always got to be a do nothing option in every business case. So we would have to look at, what are the costs and risks with anything that we wanted to go ahead with, and we should always be assessing it against the costs and risks of not doing it. This is, ultimately, even with private funding, it will be paid for out of, car parking revenues and public money over a number of years. But we have to assess that at the time. In terms of how far down the road we are, we have had conversations with a number of companies, and what they have given us an indication of is basically how much it would cost us to do it and how it would work, because we would probably have to basically give them a license to operate the car park for quite a long time, and they would take the revenues, but we would get the car park back in return. So there's always a do nothing option. What I don't want to do is just let the planning permission lapse. I want to make sure that we've made a conscious decision before that, so that we either get on site or we make a decision we need to do something different. If we make a decision we need to do something different, we would have to be really confident that we could deliver a significant mitigation in terms of stopping cars from coming onto the site, either through people accessing the site differently or, and walk through things like park and ride. And at the moment, I don't, I think we could probably pull those options together for a few months to get us to a construction phase, but I'm not seeing lots of really easy local park and ride options that are going to be permanent options for us. So that's what we'll have to weigh in the multi-story case if we don't. I'm sorry, I can't be more specific at the moment, but I don't want to commit to something where decisions have been made.
No, I see that, but just you want to be good neighbours and do highlighting quite a significant issue. So.
Do your dreams of the multi-story car park fit the planning proposals that agree?
Yes. Yes.
So you haven't got any proposed changes?
No.
So we haven't got to.
We wouldn't
So
debate.
what is the deadline for?
It's the end of
planning?
end of 2025.
They have 3 years.
3 years, and that was approved with
Coming up to it.
coming up to 3 years.
No, it's not. It expires at the end of 2025.
Can you tell me what the position is with regard to the bus service between Epsom and Helier and vice versa?
Yes, we have the H1 bus. It's available for public as well as staff, isn't it?
correct.
Well, first of all, the timetable for the bus is on the website is out of date.
Okay, we'll take that away.
There's also a misunderstanding among the staff whether the bus is eligible for patients and staff.
Okay.
So certain improved service between the two hospitals would certainly alleviate parking, wouldn't it?
We will take that away. That's really helpful feedback. Thank you.
And that's obviously true with your dreams site, because at the moment there's no direct route to Marston from Epsom. So obviously,
So the S2 does go via the master site.
does it?
Yeah.
It's not a very good route, is it? Really? I mean, when my wife was travelling to there, it was not worth getting it.
Yeah.
I didn't think it went,
No, I'm fairly confident.
Negotiations with TfL need to be greatly improved because the buses network from Epsom to that part of Sutton is not good.
So because the site that we're planning to put the hospital on is part of a much wider development.
Yeah.
So there's the London Cancer development, which is going to be a major.
I appreciate
life
that.
science
I appreciate the reasons for going there, and actually applaud the
You let me
reasons for
finish?
going there.
What I was saying is that TfL are now planning on the basis not just of the hospital going there, but also of the London Cancer Hub going on there. So that they are planning around there being a significant centre of employment on the site. I think all of us who are developers on the site are still concerned about getting people on and off it. But TfL are planning to put more than just the S2 on there. And we've also got the doubling of the rail line to Belmont from Sutton as well, which has got national levelling up.
I wasn't going to talk about parking, but I was at the hospital yesterday in the car park queue, when I got into the car park, most of the cars went straight ahead. I went right, and actually there were quite a lot of vacant spaces, and I wondered if you should look at how people are directed round the car park.
So the ones straight to the right when you go into the car park?
Well, that's when I went, and there were several spaces, but most people were going straight ahead. I wondered if you should get people snaking along, whether that would help.
We can certainly look at the signage.
And the other thing that I was going to ask you, how much consideration are you giving to the number of houses which are going to have to be built in the borough? And are you taking those numbers into account when planning the beds for the future hospital?
That's a really interesting question. So, I mean, we are consulted as part of the local plan, and we are funded for an element of growth every year. I think the difficulty with the houses versus the beds is that it's quite difficult to see how sort of individual housing developments necessarily drive specific challenges with the number of beds. What we know is that specific types of developments drive the demand for beds. So supported living, large nursing and residential homes, we have the data from those postcodes and we know that they drive the demand for acute hospital services inevitably, given the demographics associated with them. And that some of that growth that we've seen in that population, some of the growth in demand, was what allowed us to then go and get some more funding to open some more beds at Epsom over the last couple of years. With the modelling for the new hospital, there's a national demographic and non-demographic growth model that we all have to comply with that basically takes all the Office of National Statistics data and puts it into your current demand and then spits out basically how many beds you need across your whole trust up to 2042. And that has non-demographic growth, so housing growth built into it. I think the specific challenge you raise is, does it have the input from the Epsom and your local plan? And I don't think it goes down to that level. Do you know what the
government is wanting this borough to build?
Oh, thousands, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I'm a local resident. I absolutely know.
But I just feel that a lot of money could be wasted if there's not enough hospital beds when all this money is being spent.
So the modelling that we are doing is basically that national modelling, which assumes a certain amount of housing growth going into each area. We want to make sure that, in a sense, we plan a little bit beyond that. So what we're trying to do is say, well, that's national modelling, but we want to give ourselves a little bit of headroom as well. I think another of the, because we've got the different estates to manage across, that gives us flexibility.
Gentleman over there.
Thanks for coming this evening. Regarding the car park again, I live right by it, and basically Saturday and Sunday it's completely empty. So 2 days of the week there's no traffic whatsoever. I don't know how much it's going to cost to build. I heard £10 million, maybe more. I don't know. Do you know how much it's going to cost? Because that would pay for a lot of staff for a long time to work weekends.
I mean, I think it's a really interesting point that you raise. The first thing to say is that the funding for a car park would, if we funded it ourselves, it would come from capital, so it's different funding to revenue, which we use to pay for the staff. But sadly, the evidence that we have is that patients don't want to attend on the weekend, and our staff don't necessarily want to work in those plan care services on the weekend. So I'm not sure that the answer to the car parking issue is to try and spread our services out over 7 days a week in that way, because I'm just not sure it would be effective. Ultimately, I think what we know is we need more car parking provision on the site, and I do think that it is, notwithstanding some of the impacts on local residents, I think it's still something that we need to give really serious consideration to, in line with the planning commission we've previously got.
It got rejected twice, and you took it to the planning inspector and that was massive cost, and to the council as well.
Well, regardless, we now have a planning permission, and that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Turning the clock back maybe 7 or 8 years, was talk at that time of a new pub being built in front of the hospital, adjacent to Walking Road, on the small car park there. Is that still a possibility? In which case, how does that affect the car park?
There's no plan to do that.
Where would it be any new
I don't think there's a need currently for a new building on the Epsom Hospital site.
Lady up there.
Yeah, the S2 doesn't go to Royal Master.
Okay, thank you for your question.
With the S2 though, it's widening through by one such on London Road. The new S2 goes down the road which goes to Belmont past the big church and then up. But the problem is, lots of people don't use it because you still have to go through Sutton. So it's a smaller bus, it gets tagged. But if it could go up the London Road, which goes past St Anthony's and Young Hospitals, and then straight up to Royal Marsden, I think lots of staff would use it. But because you have to go into Sutton and go 20 miles an hour and go round, there is 6 buses on the London Road plus the North Tube, which then go to Sutton Town Centre. There is no need for the S2 to go to Sutton Town Centre. It would be so much quicker to go the back way and miss out Sutton Town Centre. And as someone who had to use the hospital for over a year, I had to get 3 buses and by the time I got there, I normally ended up getting the Uber home because I was exhausted. Because unfortunately, your signage in the hospital for the bus, which would have been easier to go to Epsom and then get a bus back to where I live, I could never find the timetable, I could never find the bus stop, and unfortunately, your gynecology ward, which is right at the back of the hospital, when you're unwell, you walk all the way around the hospital to the bus stop. I was then exhausted.
Well, that's really helpful feedback. I mean, I think one thing that you might want to consider, Chair, is that I know that TfL also have partnerships managers who are really happy to come out and talk, and it might be that it's actually quite helpful for TfL to hear some of this feedback from you directly. As for the signage within the site, the buses, we can pick that up because this is why events like this are so helpful, because we get that feedback and that's something we can do something about.
The hospital bus stopped in the village, so it stopped at the hospital, outside the job centre, Rainbow Centre, or Epsom Bath, if you're not remember it, and then it goes all the way to the hospital. But if it just stopped in the village, on the London Road at North Chin, because you've got to remember, anyone who's on your east side, the trains go that way. You can jump on the train and be there in 5 minutes. It took me 2 hours to get to Royal Marsden.
Yeah.
And I live just by one such half on the London Road, 2 hours.
I mean, I'm a certain resident. I get it. I would far rather use a lot more public transport.
Yeah. And I would happily get it, but I end up getting the Uber when I finish my treatment because I was exhausted.
I understand.
I think this lady reiterates what I was saying, but you would tell me otherwise. The S2 went through.
Well, I'm really sorry because I genuinely thought the last time I checked the S2. Yes, you did.
But even signposting, as someone who's younger than majority of people, to find a bus stop, to find the signage, just to go to Epsom, you can do the colour coding and find out where on that. It's not simple anymore.
No.
And nothing is simple, and all your doors are not disabled friendly. Even in the new A&E department, you have to put them open. Now, if you imagine you've got a bag and crutches or in a wheelchair, and you've got to lift the door to push it open, or someone's got to do it, they're not accessible whatsoever.
No. Okay, that was helpful feedback. Thank you. I mean, just on the motorised doors, Chris, do we struggle to install them in some places?
Well, we do, but I think the point you're making about accessibility is very valid, actually. You've mentioned doors, and it's not just necessarily, fire doors by virtue of their design are very heavy. It's not just people with accessibility issues who suffer with those, actually. So one of the things that I've done elsewhere, which I think is probably quite an important thing to do, particularly at Epsom, is have our accessibility properly surveyed and to identify exactly where the risks are. We have done that. There is quite a lot of work already been done, particularly at St Helier, but also at Epsom, about to make our hospitals more access friendly.
When you've done it, it's somebody with a wheelchair.
Actually, I'll make a point about that in a minute. But I think a survey is very important. But because we've done a lot of work, but it's probably fair to say it's been fairly piecemeal. We've got these changing places toilets and facilities now, which are very helpful. There are other things we should be doing around making the site more accessible, because some of the navigation between the different buildings is not easy. It's probably much more difficult even at St Helier than it is here. So the whole access issue needs to be looked at. To answer this gentleman's question, one of the things that we did at when I was at Brompton, we actually had something where we directors actually went round the hospital in a wheelchair, and it was a real eye opener for me. I couldn't get in. I couldn't get up at least one or two of the access ramps because I didn't have a motorised wheelchair. So in terms of your point, I think it's very valid. I think one of the things I'd be more than happy to commit to is doing a wheelchair challenge with somebody who's actually in a wheelchair.
Sure, there's plenty of disability groups around here.
Yeah, so I will definitely.
I would ask my wife.
Yeah. No, I would. It's a really important point. I will engage with the access community. We'll get a survey done. So that should actually tell us where the main risks for access are, because it's not just people in wheelchairs who have trouble accessing our sites.
Also, we are at the and then you go to get blood tests. It'd be really helpful to have just a map of somewhere we can screenshot it to keep people with this route.
Yeah, no, I think as James already mentioned, I've already written down an action to review how we sign some of the critical services, looking at the ways to navigate safely around the site, because there's quite a lot of traffic around the site.
Hospitals are confusing buildings.
They are confusing.
They are.
And the problem we have with Epsom is that because we've sort of stuffed a lot of services into Headley and Wells and that main thoroughfare, there's a lot of clinics through that area, and it can be difficult to know where you need to go, because there's lots of clinic spaces in there. But I think that the feedback on the signage is really helpful. We've set aside money this year to update our signage, and this is useful.
Sorry, can I just make one more point on access before we? So one of the, I've worked with an organisation called Access Able in the past, where one of their outputs, if you like, is to look at how our website is updated with facilities around how services are accessed. Because as the demographic changes, I think is the point James was making earlier around our strategic future. There are going to be more and more people who struggle to access our site. So it's a really important point you raised there.
Can I just have one?
No. Can we move on? Just to give other people a chance to speak.
Could you add coat hoods or put band hoods in your toilets? Because also, if you are going to have a reception desk, make sure it's low enough that someone who's shorter, because I know whenever I find breakfast,
I'm happy to be contradicted. I'll happily meet you at your convenience on the site, because it was my impression that most of our toilets actually had these. No,
and they are, they're high up.
That's another issue. But I'll leave my contact details with John. If you want to meet up with me, I'll happily go around some of these facilities and check them for you. And if they don't have the hooks, I'll make sure they fit it.
Okay, thanks.
Could I ask you, please don't forget the blind and partially sighted. What help do you give to those people, those patients who visit to get round the site?
Okay,
luckily I'm not actually affected.
I can answer that there are a whole range of disabilities. Not wheelchair is the obvious thing you think of when you think of access problems. There are people with hearing difficulties. There are people with sight difficulties, and that's a really crucial part of a survey done by somebody like Access Able, because they will look at all of the various disabilities that people have. So we won't be forgetting the hard of hearing, hard of sight, because anything we can do to make their lives easier is going to be helping us in the long term to provide a better service.
Thank you. The gentleman there.
Could I just ask, could you clarify, when the hospital site was built as bought by Legal in General, I understand there's another strip of land owned by St Kilda's Trust. Was that bought also?
I don't know.
Pretty.
I don't know. That predated me, and I don't know.
Let me find out about that, and I'll get back to you.
Unfortunately, the transaction predates me. I don't know.
Different back.
Can I just do a switch back to provision of services? I was in hospital for that 2 weeks ago. Some surgery. As I left, I was given one surgery. I was told that if I had any kind of problems, I should go to A&E and St Helier.
So I would be surprised if you were told that the Epsom A&E was closed. What you might have been told, however, is that we don't do emergency surgery at St Helier. So if you needed a revision to your surgery, depending on what it was, then we would have directed you to St Helier, because because the only surgery we do at Epsom is planned. So if we need to take somebody back to theatre on an emergency basis, we only do that at St Helier. So if somebody does present at Epsom, we have to get them up at St Helier anyway. So if somebody has a post-operative complication, we would normally direct them to St Helier. So it might be, we would never ever say the ED is closed, and I'm sorry if our staff communicated in a way that that was what you took from that. We do need to have a look at that, because that isn't true. But what I think they should have said to you is, if you have a certain complication, please go straight to St Helier, because it will save you time.
Just following on that, actually, with the new emergency care hospital that comes on straight, will there still be some form of A&E here at Epsom? I think it would be helpful to clarify that.
So what we've committed to is having a 24/7 urgent treatment centre. So it will be able to treat a very large percentage of the walking conditions that are currently seen in the ED. So the vast majority of patients who physically walk into the ED are never admitted, they're seen and treated. And actually, it's still the case at Epsom that about 8 times out of 10, if you walk in, then you'll be seen, treated and discharged within 4 hours. Actually, most of the delays are for patients who need to be admitted. So if you need admission to hospital, there are delays because the beds are very full. But that walk-in provision, most of that will stay at Epsom and St Helier. And then if you then need to be admitted, or you need a higher level of assessment, we will then have ways of getting you up to Scotland.
Thanks for clarifying that. I think there's a bit of confusion there. But
Sure.
And then we're trying to catch up.
Sorry, I can't see. Sorry.
Yes.
No, just here. Just here. Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks, Chris, for offering the details. It's the first time in 4 years for the hospital that somebody has taken responsibility for building works. So a brief ask that somehow put those details on the website, perhaps not you directly, but and route through the contacts, because I've had difficulty finding people responsible. This relates to Langley Wing. I'm guessing by the news just at events, and the particular one noise. And so I'll see later on this, but are you aware that there's a planning complaint relating to building works that have been happening, and it's problematic?
Apologies, I wasn't aware, but perhaps we'll pick up after the meeting and bring me up to speed, and then I'll deal with it.
Right.
Can I just ask you glossed over the legal and general?
Yes, because I've got no more to say about it.
Which I understand, although I imagine a lot of people here are very worried about that, because that obviously, as you probably appreciate, was massive for us as residents, what was going to happen there. I think we all breathed a massive sigh of relief when it didn't, but obviously now we don't know what's going to happen. In the meantime, my understanding from Ring, who presented to a different group here, was that the site would be levelled completely and you would have access to all of it for car parking until something happened. That clearly hasn't happened. Even the 6 parking spaces where the flats used to be are for some reason cordoned off and not being used by staff, which I find incredible. What's the plan? Because half the site is boarded up.
So I think we've looked at how much staff car parking we need and is economic to put into use at the moment, and we've done that. I think we're still assessing whether we would go further, and because we would have to do quite significant work to other parts of the site to make it safe, and we wouldn't actually gain that many parking spaces from doing it. So I think our assessment is we've gone as far as we want to at the moment with that. I don't think we necessarily want to be spending really, really large amounts of public money on health and safety adjustments for a relatively small number of additional spaces to fully use the full extent of the site.
I mean, I think you could free up 6 immediately without doing anything other than take the tape down.
I think the assessment of our estates team, I mean, our legal duties as from a health and safety perspective, with respect to the level of the surface and the lighting and the marking, are actually quite significant. And one of the challenges with the Epsom site is we have, very sadly, had a couple of quite serious injuries relating to the demarcation between pedestrian and car zones, and relating to the space, and also actually people sort of tripping on some of the non-level ground around. So we've just got to assess the costs and the benefit of putting those extra spaces into use. And currently what we've got is our current assessment of where we're at. And no need.
Can legal in general just hang on to that site indefinitely?
That would be a question for your colleagues on the Parliament Committee rather than me, I'm afraid. So I can't answer that.
Well, I can tell you the simple answer is yes,
What was
they
the
can.
question, please?
Can legal in general just hang on to that site and not do anything with it? Well, they can. You know, land banking is a big issue across the country, but I would hope legal in general will actually want to dispose of the site for a good price, and then an alternative development will come forward. But obviously, that in itself will be.
Forever.
Well, I can't imagine it would be. You know, most landowners, particularly companies like legal in general, want to get a return as soon as they can.
Can they build a multi-storey car park?
Sorry, I don't know. I'm not going to go down. I am not going down that route.
Just going on from the question at the back about services, you obviously spoken a bit about maternity. There's no, as part of the plan you outlined, splitting the services between, say, Helier site and this site.
Between the Sutton site.
Sorry, yes, be potentially a new site subject to a planning application in 2025. So when that goes ahead, will it only be at that point in time where we as the public and then the residents will know what is going to be residual services on this site, or is there any change to what's already been put out publicly? You said that that would be the point where you share publicly what would be on that planning application.
No, so just to clarify then, what we need to put forward in the planning application for the new hospital is everything to do with, you know, what the building looks like, how close it goes to the local residents, what the access routes are in and around, how we do services, etc. So it's about the technical delivery of the building and obviously its design. So everything you would expect in any planning application for any large building, we are really clear that what goes into that site is the ED, the emergency department, the acute medicine, the emergency surgery, the intensive care, the inpatient maternity care, and the inpatient children's care. It's those 6 services, and that's the basis of the hospital that we've designed, and that has been absolutely consistent right the way back from consultation in 2019, and that remains absolutely the basis of what we're putting into the planning application. We're also very consistent in terms of maternity care, what stays on this site, antenatal and postnatal care, and again that is consistent with the consultation we did in 2019. The planning application process is a town planning process, like a planning process for any developer, and the London Borough of Sutton treats us, the NHS, like another developer for the purpose of that planning application. So we don't get any special favours for being part of the public sector. We just have to apply like any other developer.
And so that's good to know that what was set out before remains the case. That's just really to say share publicly, that doesn't mean anything.
That's shared publicly the design, because clearly if I was sat in front of Belmont, or stood in front of Belmont South Cheam Residents Association now, which I have done virtually but not physically, what they would want to know about is the design of the hospital, how tall it's going to be, how close it's going to come to the Cotswold Road houses, and also where the roads and sites can get.
I'll try to speak up a bit. I'm just wondering, I've just thinking twice recently I've been directed to GP surgery, either for myself or a family member. And both times the GP has been unable to do what they've been asked to do, so we ended up carrying on with that patient or the urgent treatment centre. I wonder how that relationship's going, if you're becoming more burdened if the GPs are withdrawing services.
Now that is an interesting question. If you speak to some of my ED doctors, they would say that they do feel an impact. If you look at the overall numbers of ED attendances, you would say actually they're not going up. So we're seeing more complex people who need to go into the hospital with more complex needs, but especially post-COVID. But actually the overall number of ED attendances is not going up. There is a constant challenge on the relationship between a hospital and a GP over who should be doing what in terms of follow-up for tests, in terms of follow-up care, in terms of prescriptions, etc. And we do have really good relationships with our local GPs, and generally we manage to sort those issues out where we're aware of them. But you will be aware that GPs nationally are taking what they're calling collective action. So GPs nationally are taking effectively a form of industrial action because they believe that the behaviour and the practice is not enough that they're getting from government. And that means that nationally some GP practices are refusing to do some things that they've previously done because they don't believe that the government is funding them for them. So it is a bit of an evolving picture, it is a bit of an evolving challenge. But if you ask me in pure numbers terms, do we have more people presenting because they can't have GP access at the moment? The answer would be no, we don't see that in the numbers. I think the one particular challenge that we see every winter and that we do plan for is with children with respiratory viruses. So we have about a 2-month season where we have a lot of children get really ill with RSV and bronchiolitis, and those families do sometimes struggle with GP access because when those children get sick, they get sick quite quickly. So we try and put on extra paediatric doctors to deal with that. Sometimes we put some GPs in ED to try and deal with that as well. There is now a vaccine for RSV, so we're waiting to see if that has an impact and reduces some of that.
Gentleman over there, and I'll come back to you there.
So my question also relates to that. We spoke to somebody involved in the construction program who was told that tree cover would be increased on that side where it does go now.
Right.
Because the newly erected buildings are now significantly higher than they were. So we have light shining straight into our front windows. There's no lights there, but also we've heard recently why this tree cover
we will have to take it away because I think this is the first we're hearing tonight that we are causing a neighbour problems. So, no, I mean, I'm sorry that you.
It's your contractors that we've spoken to multiple times, and not passed it on.
And unfortunately,
I've not been able to get contact details for anybody else to speak to, and hence it's gone to a complaint.
I mean, we will check in with our capital projects team because I've had absolutely no feedback from either the contractors directly or from our own capital projects team that have been made of complaints. I do take this really seriously because actually, we do know that Langley is quite close to the back of the site and there is increased ventilation plant there now. The challenge we have is that ventilation plant is a statutory requirement for us to provide in those board areas. So if that is
statutory requirement to be under 50 dB at my windows.
Yeah. So if there's a clash between those two statutory requirements, it's something we're going to have to work through because that is going to be quite challenging for us. But we will pick it up because, as I say, before tonight we were not aware we were causing a problem to our neighbours.
And the tree cover aspect, where why particular houses, tree cover is actually undertaken to others, so it's now a new therapy garden fully visible, and also, I suspect,
Okay, thank you.
Just a slightly different question, which is about the lighting on Woodcote Green Road. The car park that is immediately off the main Woodcote Road entrance, Woodcote Green Road entrance. The lighting is absolutely ridiculous. out all proportion to anything. There are like 6 massive floodlights lighting a small car park. The lighting on the other side where the staff car park, the main staff car park is, which is around the back of the demolished site, is very acceptable, and it's light sensitive, so as you walk towards your car, it gets brighter. But for some reason, you've got ridiculous kind of floodlights there, and I just don't. From an environmental point of view, I just can't see you need that many lights.
The one immediately above the road.
The car park where you, right by the bus stop where the trees have just been cut down.
Yeah.
But there are, I think there are. Well, I have taken a photo of it if you want to see what it looks like right now.
Well, my car's in it, so I'll look on the way back. So,
I mean, it's lighting the whole of the millennium green on the other side of the road, and I just think that's really excessive and not very good for the environment. Really. So it would be really great to have a look at that.
No, I take the point. So we'll definitely have a look at that.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any points?
well, I mean, there's always lots that come out of these, and it's really good to hear because I mean, I'm not on the site all that often at night during the summer, so I suspect those lights have gone in since the summer, and I'll walk back and have a look now. So thank you.
That same car park when you turn in from opposite, is that meant to be one way?
No, it's 2-way on the entrance until the
Well,
that first
on
right
the
turn.
road, it's got a one-way sign.
No, it's definitely more. I
I know, because you all come out that car
I
park.
turn left out there, yeah. So I really hope it's not one way because I did drive from one
Well,
way.
it used to be one way, but you would come in there and drive all the way through and then leave through the door.
We'll have a look inside because I think practically for the people who are using that car park, I think it's much easier if we can get back out.
I'm not arguing that. I'm saying is
The signage.
back to the signage.
Yeah.
When the demolition was in place, there were one-way signs on the boards there. They've gone now.
Yeah. It should be one way from from the act to the right turn just before Sullyard. It should be one way right away through the rest of the site. That's my understanding. As I say, I use that car park on that.
I think we've just about exhausted everybody around the cells probably. I'd just like to very much thank James and Chris for attending tonight to answer your questions. I think it's been really, really helpful. So we really do appreciate it. So I think should we just give them a round of applause. You just stay if you want to.
I'll stay because I'll pick up with one or two of the individuals that have
Thank you so much.